On the 11th of November, 2018, at the Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph in Whitehall, London, a small gold watch caught the grey afternoon light on Meghan, Duchess of Sussex's left wrist. Cool, compact, its rectangular dial the color of winter sun against black wool. It was identified by press observers as a Cartier Tank Française. Within hours of the photographs circulating widely, a claim had already formed in headlines across the world. The watch had belonged to Princess Diana. No entry for such a piece appears in the publicly accessible records of the Royal Collection Trust. No public statement from Cartier has confirmed the watch's provenance. The Spencer estate, which assumed control of Diana's personal effects after August 1997, has not formally attributed it. And yet the story persisted, repeated until repetition began to function as evidence. In royal jewelry, as in royal protocol, time is never incidental. The question was always whose. Subscribe if you want the fully documented story behind this watch and what the historical record actually confirms. Diana Spencer's relationship with personal jewelry was, by all documented accounts, a deeply private undertaking. While the pieces she wore in an official capacity, the sapphire engagement ring, the Spencer family tiara, the formal loans from the royal household vault, belonged to a public Diana, shaped by duty and ceremony. Her personal collection told a quieter story. The cold brightness of those borrowed stones told one truth. The warmth of the pieces she chose herself told another. Following the decree absolute of August 28, 1996, which formally ended her marriage to Charles, Prince of Music, Wales, Diana retained sole ownership of all items classified as her personal property, separate from pieces held in trust by the Crown or the royal household. Among those personal effects were watches, small daily objects that occupied a different register from the grand tiaras and diamond suites reserved for state occasions. Her jewelry choices in the final years of her life grew markedly more personal and, in the view of those who documented her style, more deliberately expressive. The Spencer estate, administered after her death on August 31, 1997, by her executors, Lady Sarah McCorquodale and Francis Shan Kidd, assumed responsibility for cataloging and distributing Diana's private possessions. Her will, proved at the principal registry of the family division in the autumn of 1997, directed personal effects to be given to family and friends at the executor's discretion. It named no specific item by maker or catalog description. Whether Diana owned a Cartier Tank Française remains, in the strictly documentary sense, an open question. What the record confirms is that she wore personal jewelry with deliberate purpose. What it does not confirm is this particular piece. Cartier's relationship with the British royal family is one of the most extensively documented partnerships in the history of European luxury. In 1902, King Edward VII conferred upon the Paris house a royal warrant, formally designating Cartier as his jeweler, a recognition that consolidated what had already been an active commercial relationship between the Mason and the British Crown. The warrant opened a decades-long chapter of royal commission and personal patronage that extended music through the 20th century and into the present. Two different documentary trails flow from this relationship, and the distinction between them is central to any discussion of provenance. The first traces official royal commissions, pieces ordered by or for the Crown, recorded in Cartier's client music, ledgers, and in royal household accounts, often confirmed also in portrait sittings and coronation records. The second traces private purchases made by royals acting as individual clients, documented by Cartier internally, but not necessarily reflected in any royal household inventory or public record. This second category is harder to access, more easily misunderstood, and far more vulnerable to narrative drift. Diana's relationship with Cartier, to the extent it appears in the public record, was personal rather than institutional. She was photographed at events associated with the house. She wore pieces consistent with Cartier's aesthetic vocabulary, but she was not commissioning state pieces through the formal mechanisms of royal patronage. A private client relationship, real, plausible, and consistent with her habits of personal acquisition after 1996, would leave a very different paper trail from a royal commission. That trail, if it exists for a Tank Française, has not been made public. Private patronage and authenticated royal provenance are not interchangeable. The clasp that fastens one does not fasten the other. What the photographic record actually shows requires the careful, patient attention a conservator would apply to a portrait under raking light. Diana was photographed extensively throughout her public life, from the engagement announcement at Buckingham Palace in February 1981 to the final documented images taken in Paris in August 1997. Among the thousands of press photographs archived by agencies including Getty Images and the Press Association, Diana is visible wearing watches on multiple occasions across different decades. The shimmer of a gold case at a wrist, the cool weight of a bracelet strap, these details are legible in the record. What is also legible with care is the model. The Cartier Tank Française, distinguished by its integrated bracelet and slightly curved profile, entered production in 1996. It is a different object from the tank must, or the original tank design, that Diana is visible wearing in photographs from the 1980s and early 1990s. For Diana to have owned a Tank Française, she would have needed to acquire it in the final 12 months of her life, between 1996 and August 1997. That window is narrow. It is not impossible, but plausibility is not documentation. No museum catalog entry, no auction record, no estate inventory line, and no statement from any institutional body, Cartier, the Spencer Estate, the Royal Collection Trust, or any palace communications office, has been publicly cited to confirm that the Cartier watch Meghan wears was once Diana's. Jewelry historians and royal commentators who have addressed Diana's personal collection on the record have noted the breadth of her personal taste without identifying a Tank Française as a confirmed possession. The evidentiary gap is not a footnote. It is the central archival fact of this story. Absence of documentation is not evidence of absence. In provenance scholarship, it is where the question must begin. The passage of royal jewelry between generations has, across British history, followed conventions encoded not in statute, but in practice, in household custom, and in the documented management of royal estates. Pieces held formally by the crown return to the royal household upon the conclusion of a working royal's tenure. Pieces acquired or received as personal gifts belong to the individual and pass through their personal estate. Diana's position after August 1996 placed all remaining jewelry unambiguously in the second category. Her will, proved in the autumn of 1997, directed her executors to distribute personal possessions to such family members and friends as they thought Diana would have wished to benefit. No piece of jewelry was named in the will's main body. A separate letter of wishes, reportedly attached as a non-binding document, expressed Diana's hope that the majority of her personal effects would pass to William and Harry when they came of music age. The Spencer family has not published this letter. Its specific provisions, if any, regarding individual pieces remain unknown to the public record. Several royal biographers published in the years following Diana's death recorded, in broadly consistent terms, that the personal jewelry passed to her sons. Beyond that general account, which specific pieces went to which prince, by what mechanism, and at what moment, have never been publicly itemized by the Spencer estate or by any representative of the royal household. The will is public. Its silences are the record that matters most here. Grief formalized in legal language does not cease to be grief, but for a jewel to become verifiable heritage, it must also become record. By the autumn of 2017, Meghan Markle had entered the public life of the British royal family with the formal announcement of her engagement to Prince Harry on November 27, 2017 at Kensington Palace. From that moment, every garment, jewel, and accessory she wore became subject music, to immediate and detailed scrutiny. It was in this context that the Cartier Tank Française watch entered the public record as a recurring element of her visible wardrobe. The watch appeared at formal engagements, in candid photographs, and at events of national significance throughout 2018. By the Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph that November, the attribution to Diana had already begun to circulate in press coverage. The claim emerged not from any formal institutional statement, but through a confluence of personal testimony and editorial inference. In the Netflix documentary series Harry and Meghan, released in December 2022, references are made throughout to items Meghan received that had once belonged to Diana. In Harry's memoir Spare, published in January 2023, and reviewed extensively by royal commentators at the time. Harry describes the experience of giving Meghan objects that had once belonged to his mother, objects that carried for him an enormous personal weight. Neither the documentary nor the memoir, as assessed by press analysis at the time of publication, music, includes a specific, dated, sourced attribution of the Tank Française watch to Diana. No provenance chain, no jeweler's record, no estate. Inventory reference connecting this particular object to its claimed prior owner. The claim rested on personal testimony. The archive rested on its own silence. A sincere claim and a documented claim are both forms of communication. They are not interchangeable in any catalog. In the discipline of royal jewelry scholarship, provenance is not a narrative. It is a chain of evidence, each link verifiable, each gap an honest admission of what remains unknown. The curatorial standards maintained by the Victoria and Albert Museum, the Royal Collection Trust, and the principal auction houses establish a consistent benchmark. For a piece to be formally attributed to a past owner, that attribution must be traceable through documentary evidence. Music, a maker's mark alone, is insufficient. Visual identification is a starting point, not a conclusion. The documented dispersals of Diana's personal effects offer a useful comparison. In June 1997, 79 of her personal dresses were auctioned at Christie's New York. Music, raising approximately $3.25 million for charity. Each lot was documented with provenance, photographed on Diana at specific, dated events, and catalogued under a verifiable chain of custody. The aquamarine ring she wore in the final months of her life appears in multiple dated press photographs from 1997 and was identifiable on that basis alone when Meghan wore it at her evening wedding reception at Windsor on May 19, 2018. The attribution required no special claim. The photographic record was the record. The Tank Française presents a different case. No equivalent photographic confirmation showing Diana wearing that specific model on a documented occasion has been publicly produced or cited in any institutional context. No Sotheby's entry, no Christie's provenance note, no Cartier authentication letter, and no Spencer estate statement has been offered to close the evidentiary gap. The leading auction houses have been consistent on this point. Provenance is what can be documented, not what is music felt. The feeling is real. The proof remains outstanding. Emotional truth and documentary truth carry equal moral weight. In a catalog, they occupy music, very different columns. The Cartier Tank family of watches presents its own internal complications for the purposes of attribution. The original music tank was designed by Louis Cartier in 1917, a detail confirmed in Cartier's own published history of the design. Its rectangular case, inspired by the silhouette of military hardware then crossing the Western Front, the design entered production in 1919 and generated over the following century a range of variants. The Tank Must, the Tank Américain, the Tank Solo, and introduced in 1996, the Tank Française, music, distinguished by its integrated metal bracelet and slightly curved case profile. This chronology matters directly in the context of Diana's documented watch history. Press photographs from the 1980s and early 1990s showing Diana with what has been described as a Cartier tank, or in almost every identifiable case. Music, consistent with earlier variants of the design, rather than with the Tank Française that did not exist until 1996. If Diana owned a Tank Française, she acquired it specifically between 1996 and August 1997. That is a narrow and precise window. Plausible, yes. Cartier boutiques in London and Paris served a clientele of European royalty and public figures throughout that period. And Diana's post-divorce independence had, by all biographical accounts, music, extended to her shopping habits, but narrow plausibility is not the same as documentation. No Cartier Paris or London client record establishing this purchase has been produced or cited publicly. The watch Meghan wears is, by design identification, a Tank Française. The watches visible on Diana's wrist in the documented photographic record appear to be earlier variants. Whether Diana separately acquired a Tank Française music in her final year remains in the archive a question without a current answer. Music, a watch measures time. The archive records only what was confirmed within it. The Spencer family's handling of Diana's music, jewelry legacy, represents one of the most carefully maintained silences in contemporary royal culture. Charles Earl Spencer, who delivered the eulogy at Diana's funeral at Westminster Abbey on September 6, 1997, a speech that entered the public record immediately and remains among the most documented addresses of the late 20th century, has spoken extensively about his sister's cultural and charitable legacy in the years since. On the specific contents and current locations of Diana's personal jewelry collection, he has remained almost entirely silent in any public forum. The estate's administration concluded in the years following 1997, the personal effects distributed as directed. The Spencer family home at Althorpe House in Northamptonshire. Ray Music hosted a public memorial exhibition in the years immediately following Diana's death, at which selected personal items were displayed. A comprehensive jewelry catalog was not among them. No statement from the Spencer family has publicly confirmed the provenance of the watch as Diana's. No member of the family has, in any documented interview or public statement available in the press record, specifically attributed the Tank Française to Diana's prior ownership. The Sussex Communications Organisation Archival, established following Harry and Meghan's departure from royal duties in early 2020, has not published a provenance statement for the watch. Kensington Palace issued no such statement during the period when the Sussexes operated under its communications umbrella. The silence across every institution that might reasonably hold relevant documentation is uniform. In the heritage field, uniform institutional silence is itself not confirmation of the negative, music, but a measure of what has not yet been established. When every institution capable of confirming a claim chooses not to, the claim remains precisely that. Disputed or subsequently corrected royal jewelry attributions are not uncommon in the documented history of the British royal collection. The Cambridge Lover's Knot tiara, which Diana wore at state occasions through the 1980s, was at various points in early press coverage imprecisely its origins as a piece commissioned by Queen Mary in the early 1910s music, and passed to Elizabeth II, not consistently communicated in real time. Royal Collection Trust documentation eventually established the complete and accurate provenance. The correction did not arrive immediately, and for years the popular understanding of the tiara's history lagged behind the archival record. The pearl choker Diana wore in her characteristic layered style through the same decade similarly accumulated competing attributions, described music, variously as a personal purchase, a family piece, and a royal loan at different points in the press record. Cross-referencing of portrait documentation and household records resolved the ambiguity over music time, but the initial confusion illustrated with precision how easily visual familiarity can substitute for documentary evidence in public understanding. Diana's name attached to any object functions with extraordinary cultural force. It increases emotional value, commercial value, and biographical weight simultaneously. That force does not constitute authentication. It constitutes a heightened responsibility to meet the standard. Her legacy, of all legacies, deserves careful, documented, and scrupulously honest attribution. Some historians of royal jewelry would argue the watch's attribution requires only the family's personal testimony to be accepted. Others maintain that personal testimony, however genuine, does not meet the standard that authenticated royal provenance demands. Both positions are defensible. The record does not yet resolve them. The most recognizable name in royal jewelry history is, for that very reason, the one most in need of scrupulous documentary protection. By 2023, music, the Cartier Tank Française had become one of the most consistently photographed accessories in Meghan's international public wardrobe. It appeared at events in New York, Los Angeles, and the United Kingdom in documentary footage and at occasions of considerable public visibility. Through the combined weight of personal testimony offered in the Netflix documentary and in Harry's published memoir, the watch had acquired in broad public understanding music, and in media coverage, the status of a confirmed biographical fact, music, Diana's watch, now worn by Meghan. The mechanism by which this status was established is worth examining with care. No press conference confirmed it, no institution documented it, no auction house, royal household, or family representative published an egg provenance chain. What occurred was subtler. A private claim made through personal testimony was reported in media coverage, and in many cases repeated without consistent qualification until the qualifier itself began to disappear. Headlines that had initially noted the attribution as claimed by the family eventually dropped the caveats. The story calcified through the ordinary processes of media circulation into received history. Royal jewelry historians who have addressed the matter on the record have, in most cases, distinguished carefully music between what is documented and what is claimed. That distinction has not always survived the editorial process of mainstream coverage. The archive, which does not read newspapers, remains incomplete on the question. Repetition in journalism performs a function that repetition in provenance scholarship cannot. One substitutes familiarity for evidence. The other accepts only the evidence itself. A claim repeated across 10,000 art. Eichel's is still a claim. The archive holds one standard for all of them. The authentication standards applied by institutions responsible for royal jewelry are, in principle, consistent regardless of the emotional significance attached to any given piece. The Royal Collection trusts curatorial guidelines identify provenance documentation as the foundation of any attribution claim. A position consistent with that maintained by Christie's and Sotheby's, whose royal jewelry auction catalogs require unbroken chains of documentary custody before the phrase, formally the property of, can appear in any lot description. Independent jewelry historians who have studied the British Royal Collection music have noted consistently that visual identification, however confident, is not provenance. Music to confirm that a watch is a Cartier Tank Française is not to confirm its ownership history. Music, to confirm that it is presently worn by a member of the royal family, is not to establish what preceded that ownership. The curatorial phrase that most accurately describes the Tank Française watch's archival status is not unattributed. A claim has been made but unverified. A claim has been made without the documentary support that would allow any institution to formally confirm it. The watch exists, music, the claim exists, the documentation in any publicly available record does not. In the language of royal jewelry scholarship, undocumented pieces are not forgotten. They are in music, the careful phrasing of curators, deliberate silences. In this case, the silence may reflect a private archive not yet made public, or it may reflect an evidentiary trail that simply does not exist in the form the claim requires. Music, what can be said is only what the record says, and what the record says at present is very little. What institutions choose not to confirm is, in its own way, as informative as what they do. Diana, Princess of Wales, died in Paris on August 31, 1997. Music, in the years since, her name has functioned as the most potent single provenance claim in the history of British royal accessories. A cultural gravity rooted in genuine grief music, and genuine admiration that operates beyond anything manufactured by sentiment alone. Items verifiable music, connected to her carry that connection through documentation. The sapphire engagement ring, now on the hand of Catherine, Princess of Music, Wales, is traceable through photographs and royal records to its original presentation in 1981. The aquamarine ring photographed on Diana's hand in 1997, worn by Meghan at her 2018 wedding reception, is verifiable through that photographic record. The Cambridge Lover's Knot tiara, worn by both Diana and now Catherine, carries a documented history extending back to Queen Mary. In each case, the record is the connection. The Tank Française watch does not yet have that record. Whether it ultimately will is a question that only the Spencer Estate's private inventory Cartier's client archive or a future statement by the Sussex could answer with authority. The devotion to Diana's memory that drives the claim is entirely comprehensible. The desire to carry something of hers forward in a visible, daily way needs no justification. What it cannot do is substitute for documentation. Love and evidence are both real. They serve different purposes. For Diana's sake, as much as for the archives, the most powerful name in royal jewelry history deserves the most careful protection of its documentary record. Somewhere in the Cartier archive in Paris client ledgers, from 1996 and 1997, record purchases made in the months after the Tank Française entered production. Whether Diana Spencer's name appears among those entries has never been established in any publicly available document. Whether the Spencer Estate's private inventory, music, never published in its entirety, contains a line item for such a watch remains unknown outside the family. The watch that catches the gray winter light on Meghan's wrist, its gold cool against the pulse, its clasp closing with the quiet precision of a very well-made thing, is a Cartier Tank Française. It is hers now, in whatever sense possession becomes ownership across the distance of grief and time. The clasp closes the same way regardless of whose wrist it has known before, but the space in the record where the archive entry should appear music, the delivery note, the ledger line that from the estate or from Cartier or from the family on the record remains, in any publicly available documentation, empty. A Cartier box somewhere was once closed. Whose initials were inside it music, and in what year and under what circumstances it was opened and passed along. These remain questions music that the watch face catching the light does not answer. Only the archive could, and the archive as yet has not spoken. Music.